Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. This is a PLMA load management dialogue, and here you will discover practitioner perspectives on flexible load management, demand response, distributed energy resources, and managed charging. We're delighted that you're here joining us today, and we are excited to be presenting one of our PLMA 2025 Award of Excellence winners in this session. You'll be meeting the California Public Utility Commission and Energy Solutions, and their representatives will be speaking about an initiative which I will allow our moderator, Kevin Knight, to introduce to you. So Kevin Knight, it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to you to kick us off with today's presentation, and welcome everybody, and let's get started.
Thank you, Judy. So welcome everyone. My pleasure to introduce two people today that are award winners. So from the California Public Utilities Commission, we have Sebastian Soria, and from Energy Solutions, we have Emily Kmeyer today. So switching to slide 5, I think I want to just level set with everyone on why we're here. So quick note about the awards. It may be a little bit new, it may be a little bit different for you guys. Historically, we've had awards that were given by a range or a series of categories, program pace setter, for example. We changed a lot this year, and we went towards a award for excellence and really focused on letting the people that are nominating people really tell us what is excellent. Maybe it does not fit in the box of program pace setter, for example. So you may notice it's new. So we've left it open this year. Let everyone tell us what excellent means. And we received 20 nominations, and 9 people were finalists out of those 20 finalists. 20 nominations, 9 finalists. So the nominations were then ranked by PLMA peers. So people within PLMA read the nominations, and ultimately we did come out with 4 finalists. So the CPUC and Energy Solutions program was one of 4 winning initiatives recognized as an award of excellence at PLMA Spring Conference in Kansas City. So that was past May. So now award winners get the opportunity to really explain what their pilot was about, or what their program was about, what their initiative was, and really define what makes them excellent. So this is a really good opportunity for everyone to learn what makes this certain project award worthy. So as much as I would love to get in and tell you guys all about how this program that you're about to see funded over 15,000 installations and ultimately reduced greenhouse gas savings, I'll leave that to the professionals and subject matter experts. And I will just end my little opening with a reminder that as we go through the conversation, please do put any questions in the chat. I'm going to do my best to organize them and ask them at the end of the presentation. So if you see a question in there, I'll give it a thumbs up, meaning I saw it, and I'll add it to the list, and we will try to answer as many questions as we can. So with that said, it is my pleasure to hand the floor over to Sebastian to get us started.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sebastian Soria. I am a senior regulatory analyst at the CPUC's Energy Division within the Building Decarbonization section. I'm here to talk about the regulatory steps we took in order to bring SJET heat pump water heater into life. Next slide, please. Now, you heard me mention SJET heat pump water heater, and how does it integrate into the tech initiative? As many of you know, the tech initiative is the technology and equipment for clean heating. It is the state of California's flagship market transformation program for heat pump space and water heaters. The SJET heat pump water heater program came about really recently, and it utilized the momentum built by the tech initiative that I will go into detail here. I won't mention every detail that's on the slide, but I wanted to provide a quick timeline of the different legislative actions that have been taken for the tech initiative. And so to start at the very beginning, the tech initiative was created via legislation called Senate Bill SB 1477. At the time in 2018, the California legislature wanted to create a building decarb program. It created two, actually. It created the tech initiative and also created the building initiative for low emissions development. If you think of the tech initiative as focused on existing buildings, the build program focuses on new construction. That's the main distinction. And for any of you nerds out there, the build program is administered by the California Energy Commission. Nonetheless, the tech initiative was created then with an initial pot of funding from the California legislature. At the time, the CPUC needed to implement this legislation, and that's where you saw the initial decision called Decision D20-03-027. We eventually identified Southern California Edison SCE, one of California's 3 large electric utilities, to administer this contract. We went out to bid and eventually chose Energy Solutions as the program implementer and Opinion Dynamics as the program evaluator. So I'm mentioning this because we were creating a foundation for which SCHIP, heat pump water heater, which we identify internally for the load shifting aspect of water heaters, came about. Once the tech initiative was up and running, we noticed that the legislature was picking up that the tech branding and the tech name was gaining traction. And as you can see here with these 3 different pieces of legislation, AB 179, AB 102, and AB 157 most recently, the tech initiative keeps getting augmented with additional funds, either from the general fund or most recently from Aliso Canyon settlement proceeds from the Aliso Canyon natural gas storage disaster from a few years ago. So next slide. So as I mentioned, for us here within the CPUC and within Energy Division, the load shifting aspect of the tech program has been known to us as SCHIP heat pump water heater. Why SCHIP? Because these funds that made this program possible came from the SCHIP proceeding. So SCHIP stands for the Self-Generation Incentive Program. Some of you may be familiar with this program, but it incentivizes solar and storage and the load shifting of these devices through that proceeding. It was found through this initial decision, D19-09-027, that the SCHIP proceeding wanted to put money towards the load shifting of water heaters and utilize the thermal energy storage component within the water tanks. And so that's what came about this program. Thereafter, the proceeding identified additional pots of funding to put towards this program, as you can see with the 2 next decisions, the one in 2020 and the one in 2022. And then where it really comes into the foray here is with the last 2 decisions in 2022, D22-04-036 and D23-12-004. The Public Utilities Commission really wanted to add demand response components into this program. And so initially, with the 22-04-036 decision, we required that customers be enrolled in event-based demand response programs. And then a year later, in December 2023, we wanted to add the daily load shifting component into heat pump water heaters. And so this decision covers several other things, but of primary purpose for you all for this presentation, we had the event-based demand response that could be seen as a behavioral component. So have it be required in a thermostat or somewhere else in the home, and then have the heat pump water heater connect to a daily load shifting program. And so at the time, and currently really, the CPUC has two daily load shifting programs administered by Pacific Gas and Electric and Southern California Edison. The PG&E's was the first one, called Water Saver, and SCE's is called Smart Shift Rewards Hot Water. We wanted to incentivize S-Ship heat pump water heater customers to not only enroll in an event-based demand response program in their home, but also enroll their heat pump water heater into the Water Saver program if they were a PG&E customer, or the Smart Shift Rewards Hot Water program if they were an SCE customer. If you're wondering about San Diego, unfortunately, San Diego Gas and Electric did not have a daily load shifting program at the time. Next slide. I've talked about this already, so this is more like a recap, but the tech initiative already had brand recognition by the time the S-Ship proceeding and the subsequent S-Ship decisions came about allocating money towards heat pump water heaters. But we wanted to utilize the tech branding, the contractor network, the program infrastructure that had already been built by Energy Solutions in order to stand up the S-Ship heat pump water heater initiatives. And so that became pretty efficient for us to utilize that. So on the public, it's known as tech heat pump water heater. But again, for us here within the CPUC, we know it as S-Ship heat pump water heater. I already mentioned that for the tech initiative, we have three entities at the forefront. SCE is the contract administrator. Energy Solutions is our program implementer. And Opinion Dynamics is the program evaluator. There's a slight difference for S-Ship heat pump water heater, since we wanted an evaluator that focused on understanding load shifting. We chose Verdant. And so Verdant is the a known entity out in the field, and they serve as the program evaluator for the S-Ship heat pump water heater program. And then last, as you all know, S-Ship heat pump water heater launched in the fall 2023 under the Tech Initiative brand, and has really focused on the load shifting potential of heat pump water. Greenhouse gas reduction fund incentives from the California Air Resources Board through the Tech Initiative. And we set aside some funding for heat pump water heaters there. And we, Energy Division, wanted to move a majority of the requirements from S-Ship heat pump water heater into the Tech Initiative in order to continue the load shifting ability and learnings that we have gained so far. So I believe with that, I'll pass it over to Emily to dive into more of the implementation and operational details of making this possible.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sebastian, and thank you, Judy and Kevin as well. Can folks hear me? I might have been having a little bit of internet difficulty. Are we okay?
You are good.
Okay, thank you. So yes, I'm Emily. I'm a senior manager at Energy Solutions. And Sebastian already covered the program roles, but this slide shows a quick summary. And there were a few additional call outs I wanted to make. So first, for Southern California Edison, or SCE, and their role on one particular aspect of the program. So one of our program requirements for S-Ship, but I'm going to put our branding into practice now and just speak about it as Tech Clean California. So one of our Tech Clean California requirements, starting with the S-Ship launch, was that participating customers have to enroll in a time of use rate if they're not already on one. And SCE was really helpful in making this work smoothly. So for this requirement, we actually streamlined things for our participants by taking the responsibility on the back end. And we instead coordinated with the utilities to automatically put customers on a time of use rate after we got their consent via signature. And SCE was a great collaborator to iron out this process, and it helped us blaze the trail for other utilities as well. And another nice call out about SCE, they also automatically gave all of these customers a rate credit option that acknowledges their new heat pump water heater and makes their electricity cheaper. And then when it comes to the tech implementation team, so Energy Solutions is the prime implementer contracting directly with SCE, but we have a team of 12 great tech partners who lead on various aspects of this multifaceted initiative, all aimed at transforming the clean space and water heating market in California. And I also want to mention Ecotope. They were a partner on SGIP heat pump water heaters specifically, so not shown on this tech partner list, but they led load shifting calculations for central water heaters. And 3 of the tech partners in particular were key leads on the demand flexibility aspects that we're talking about today, and that's Association for Energy Affordability, VEIC, and Frontier Energy. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that Tech Clean California has a lot of different efforts to transform the market, but for this award and for this presentation, we're really focusing on Tech's statewide heat pump water heater incentive program. So Tech heat pump water heater incentives first launched at the end of 2021, and there's been multiple long pauses in funding availability, but at this point, for just a sense of scale, we've incentivized over 15,000 heat pump water heater units, as Kevin mentioned earlier. And this has created significant greenhouse gas savings, especially because in California, we're mostly replacing gas water heaters. So these incentives are generous. They've averaged historically upwards of $3,500 for heat pump water heaters and higher for income qualified customers. And the incentives are paid to enrolled tech contractors who pass that incentive on to the customers. And in exchange for those incentives, we have the demand flexibility requirements, which are, again, powered by SGIP, but added to the heat pump water heater incentive program in fall 2023, as Sebastian mentioned. And these requirements are aimed at turning the water heaters into grid resources rather than adding additional strain during peak hours. This can benefit customers too, minimizing electricity usage during peak hours when electricity is more expensive. So what exactly are these demand flexibility requirements? First, we have scheduling. So the heat pump water heaters that qualify for tech incentives can follow a time of use rate and reduce energy during peak hours based on the manufacturer's own operating logic. This is without the need for connectivity or outside signals, like from a program. This feature isn't turned on by default, though, so contractors have to work with customers to do so at the time of install. Then we have the 3 customer enrollments, and all are required if they're available from the customer's electric utility. So we covered the time of use rate already. That's required to help customers reduce their water heating costs since their water heater is following a time of use rate schedule. Then we have the demand response programs. As Sebastian mentioned, these demand response programs are primarily event-based programs that don't connect to the water heater itself, but include behavioral programs and programs that connect to other loads in the home. And then we have the heat pump water heater load shifting program enrollment requirement, which Sebastian mentioned was added in December, actually launched December of last year when we relaunched incentives. But these are utility programs, as he mentioned. So PG&E has Water Saver, SCE has Smart Shift, and more recently, San Diego Community Power, a CCA, has Smart Home Flex. And these programs signal the water heaters to reduce electricity usage during peak hours. Again, this launched at the end of last year, so the lessons learned in this presentation, which were developed earlier and last year, don't cover this water heater load shifting enrollment quite so much. Now, what's all this reference to integrated demand side management, or IDSM? So these program requirements actually make Tech heat pump water heater a large-scale example of an integrated demand side management program. That's what we call it when a program integrates multiple strategies to influence customers' electricity demand or demand side measures. And so in this case, it's efficient technology incentives combined with water heater load shifting, demand response, and time of use rates. And IDSM is a useful program design approach to ultimately get more customers to participate in demand flexibility, because you have your foot in the door, you have their attention with those large technology incentives, and from there, It's a smaller, more straightforward ask to complete the enrollments when it's earning them a large incentive. So next slide, please. This program is really exciting because we tried something new and showed it's possible, which is specifically putting contractors for plumbers and HVAC contractors in the lead position to facilitate a customer's demand flexibility requirements. Why the focus on contractors? Well, as the implementer of a midstream program, we will never actually interact with the customers unless they reach out to us proactively. So contractors are that key market actor here because they're actually talking to the customer. They can explain requirements, answer questions, address concerns, and actually help customers enroll. And in this role, they're also responsible for tracking completion and following up and troubleshooting issues when they arise. However, and this is a big however, most contractors have not had historically a reason before this program to understand or interact with demand response. And so adding these new requirements can complicate the sales and installation process, which can impact the contractor's bottom line. So a major role for us as the program implementers was setting contractors up to be successful with this. So through education, resources, and one-on-one support. And we've actually been doing this since the start of Tech Clean California, so almost 4 years now. When tech incentives first launched in 2021, the tech team launched a heat pump water heater load shifting pilot focused on contractor education. And one of the main accomplishments was a pilot training about core heat pump water heater load shifting concepts. And that was taken by over 300 contractors. And we also got some great early contractor feedback at that stage. And then once the CPUC announced those upcoming demand flexibility requirements in 2022, it was really all hands on deck to help contractors get ready. So leading up to the launch of those requirements in the fall 2023, and afterwards as well, we did webinars, focus groups, one-on-one outreach, and created support resources like web pages and flyers. And at the same time we were gathering as much contractor feedback as possible, we needed to understand their questions, concerns, and recommendations so that we could provide the best support and resources possible. Now, with around 350 enrolled contractors that had done heat pump water heater installations, we couldn't talk to everyone, but in the one-on-ones, we did our best to talk to contractors representing a variety of locations across the state, business sizes, and also levels of early success with the demand response enrollment requirement. So the next few slides will focus on some key findings and feedback from our contractor engagement efforts. And most of the data and responses we're going to be sharing in these next slides are from an August 2024 survey that was implemented by Tech's independent evaluator, Sebastian mentioned, Opinion Dynamics. We worked with Opinion Dynamics to ask a handful of questions really focused on the demand response enrollment requirements, since that's the one that required the most effort and nuance from contractors to make successful. And 56 contractors responded to this part of the survey. And I'd just like also to ask you to keep in mind at this point in time, we hadn't yet added that water heater load shifting program enrollment requirement. So contractors are responding specifically from the perspective of these event-based DR program enrollment requirements. But the findings in many cases can be applicable to really any type of contractor-led demand flexibility requirements. Okay, next slide. So a key insight, I think some really good news here is that with adequate support and education, contractors can facilitate customer demand response enrollments. And as we just discussed prior to tech, most contractors hadn't had a reason to know about demand response, but by the time of this August 2024 survey, we'd been doing education and outreach for about 2.5 years, and the demand flexibility requirements had been active in the program for about a year. So it was great to see that efforts had started to pay off, and 75% of contractors said that they were at least somewhat comfortable explaining demand response to customers. And I wanted to share some quotes from the early tech load shifting pilot survey, which I mentioned over 300 contractors took. And these quotes indicate an interest and appreciation for load shifting with heat pump water heaters, and that it's important to educate contractors on these core concepts like why the requirements matter and how they help customers. So you can see on the slide, we can help our customers take advantage of the time of day when power costs less and they'll have access to solar power. Learning about how these systems can maximize savings coupled with incentives is a great tool for our customers, and I'm glad to be at the forefront of the future of our industry. Love that. Okay, next slide, please. So another key insight from these surveys and our conversations in general is that one-on-one support is critical. So in that survey, contractors were asked to rate various educational resources and tech team support. And I'll just mention that the stats summarized on the slide were calculated by omitting the don't know, haven't used responses. But on average, across the resources that contractors were asked to rate, 80% of contractors chose very, moderately, or somewhat useful. And one-on-one discussions were rated as the most helpful program resource. 92% of contractors rated them as at least somewhat helpful. And these statistics help back up an understanding that we developed early on, which is that there are just limits to what we can convey in program documentation and webinars. Contractors are bound to miss or misunderstand some of the details. And these misunderstandings were easily identified and clarified through conversations. So we were able to diagnose the issue by just asking contractors to describe what they're doing or what they're confused about, and then we could offer tailored support. In these conversations and even in one-on-one emails, we could also be the single point of contact to help with troubleshooting when certain enrollment and configuration issues arose in the field. And when support from external parties like DR providers or manufacturers was needed, we were also in the best position to initiate those requests to make sure key details and context were clear. Okay, next slide, please. So speaking of the types of challenges that we can help contractors through one-on-one support, we've gathered contractor feedback on the main challenges they face with the demand response enrollment requirement. And those key challenges include distinguishing multiple demand flexibility requirements and what they as the contractor need to do for each of them, getting customers to actually agree to those enrollment requirements, which include addressing their concerns, for example, control of their technology and why they need to enroll. Another is helping customers choose a program or understand whether they're already enrolled in one, and then troubleshooting enrollment issues that can arise when customers are actually working through the enrollment. So these challenges are significant and they can't be fully addressed overnight, but just understanding what they are, including the details that come up in those categories, has allowed us to help them in some regards. We've continued to iterate our support resources to include responses to common questions and concerns, add additional detail, add troubleshooting steps and clarification where needed. And when we do this, we often make announcements over email to all contractors or office hours. So this graphic shows that ongoing approach of feedback and improvements. And the next slide is going to go over some contractor recommendations that can also help with these barriers. And then we'll be on our last slide about program design recommendations, many of which are also aimed at easing these challenges. Okay, next slide. So in that same August survey, we also collected contractor recommendations for success with facilitating the customer demand response enrollments. And it was great to see that many contractors had been finding their own ways to be successful. And these recommendations were integrated into program messaging and outreach to support other contractors. So some process best practices include introduce the demand response requirement during initial conversations to set the expectations up front. Recommend one specific demand response program to reduce customer indecision or confusion. Send a follow-up email with direct links and follow up proactively to ensure completion. And sometimes even help the customer enroll in demand response when they're on site. And then in terms of communication best practices, have staff enroll in a demand response program themselves to then be able to share firsthand experience. Become well-versed in demand response, even consider designating and training a specific staff for this purpose when possible. Not everyone's able to do that. Emphasize benefits. So contractors specifically mentioned energy conservation, bill savings, participation awards, and helping to prevent power outages. And then a reminder that enrollment is mandatory to receive a large heat pump water heater technology incentive. Next slide, please. So this is our last really content slide. So the contractors had their recommendations for success with DR enrollment. We have some recommendations too, more broadly about integrated demand-side management program design and implementation, especially for contractor-led midstream programs. And we're really excited to be able to share these, especially since IDSM will be more important in the future as needs for demand flexibility continue to grow. And just please keep in mind, this is an ongoing program, and these recommendations are really a snapshot in time. They were primarily developed based on the initial set of demand flexibility requirements. So without that water heater load shifting program enrollment, that was a more recent development. We're always happy to discuss specific learnings from that aspect as well, another time and place. But again, many of these learnings are broadly applicable, regardless of what those specific requirements are. So as a summary, contractor education and support are key whenever the program is not interacting with the customers directly. And as discussed earlier, one-on-one support was critical, and try to reach a broad diversity of contractors to represent different levels of experience and viewpoints. Reach out proactively, don't just wait to hear from them. Resources should be kept updated to include ongoing feedback. For example, customer and contractor recommendations, concerns, and frequently asked questions. And we recommend setting aside ample funding for these activities. Another recommendation is aim for simplicity and flexibility. So try to write program rules in a way that focuses on the goals like daily load shifting while leaving flexibility on the exact measures. This will help keep things simple and allow the programs to adapt along with evolving market conditions and new learnings, such as from program evaluations. And then another best practice or learning really is enforcement significantly increases enrollment rates, but be intentional about how and when you enforce those requirements. So a little story here with tech and HPWH pump water heater, we balanced the goals of high demand response enrollment rates and maintaining steady contractor participation in the program. So we took a phased approach to enforcing the new demand response enrollment requirement. Initially, we paid contractors after they completed an installation, and we verified the demand response enrollment status on the back end later on with data from the demand response program providers. And early data was indicating that roughly 40% of customers were enrolling. Then we had one-on-one conversations with a lot of contractors to reinforce expectations, address confusions, and gather their recommendations for success. We then rolled out a requirement for contractors to submit documentation that actually proves successful demand response enrollment at the time that they're submitting for the incentive payment. The water heater installation numbers remain relatively consistent, and DR enrollment improved significantly to about 85%, so up from 40%. And several contractors shared that this stepping stones approach to enforcement was necessary for their success with the program. And then when enforcement is in place, just keep in mind that real demand response enrollment barriers can arise in the field, and in some cases may require troubleshooting beyond what is reasonable to expect of the contractors. So being flexible to allow exemptions in some cases is recommended. So there's still work to be done to make flexibility requirements as seamless as possible for integrated demand-side management programs, but this effort shows that contractors can be leaders in these programs. And we've compiled a flyer of recommendations at the link on the site. You can access via the QR code, and you can also find the whole tech load shifting final report there. And we'd also love to hear from any of you who are working on similar efforts to keep learning together. So final slide is a thank you. Thank you so much to PLMA for this recognition and opportunity to share. And a few more quick thank yous. This was all made possible by the California Public Utilities Commission's vision and leadership, and we want to thank them and Sebastian and Nick St. Johnny for their close collaboration on the program. And we'd also like to thank our contract administrator, SCE, and our Tech Clean California partner organizations, especially Association for Energy Affordability, PEIC, and Frontier Energy, for this effort specifically. And finally, this program is really driven by our plumbing and HVAC contractors. And so their willingness to try new things, find ways to make it work, and share their feedback has been critical for the success of this effort. And there's our contact info. If you have questions, we also have a LinkedIn account for Tech Clean California. And yeah, I'll pass it back to Kevin. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Emily. So great presentation. I will just thank you before I thank you again at the end, I'm sure. But I think what really resonates with me is just the contractor participation and buy-in is so critical. So it was really cool to see that and really impressive. So I will remind everybody that's on the call that if you have questions, type them in the chat. I will still try to get through as many as I can. We have a few in there. But I'm going to tee up the questions. I'm going to start with the money slides that were all the way in the beginning. So Sebastian, I'm not sure if this is going to be aimed towards you, but I think I'd like to get a perspective from both of you on this. The first few slides had a lot of funds that were being authorized for this program. And I know it's often challenging to get funds for some programs like this. So I was curious if you had any thoughts you could share on what did you think was the main contributor to the success in attaining that authorization of funding for the program? Were there any key points that you thought were the most persuasive that made this kind of a good deal for all of that money to be attributed to?
That's a great question. And it's hard for me to answer that because those decisions came before my time at the commission. But I think the SCHIP proceeding, and just to provide a little bit more background, here at Energy Division, we have different topic areas, and they're called proceedings, if you will, and parties get involved in those proceedings and provide comment, and there's different staff assigned to them. And so I think, and this is me speculating here, so this is not particularly the voice of the CPUC. I would imagine that the momentum with which the tech initiative was on and building, I think that gave notice to, other people beyond, within Energy Division and obviously outside of the CPUC. And I think with that, there was identification of opportunities to do load shifting of water heaters. And, timing is everything. I think at the time, the commission was open to investing ratepayer dollars into this initiative. If you recap the slides, there's roughly $84 million that was allocated towards this program. 40 of those was basically half was ratepayer dollars, and then half was gas IOU cap and trade dollars, which are not ratepayer dollars exactly. And so I think there was just a perfect opportunity of, hey, we have this money, we have this opportunity, can we utilize them for something useful? And so I think the vehicle that was created with the tech initiative was helpful in inserting that in there. And one more thing I'll say is that I think it was great for Energy Division to work across proceedings. So you heard me mention about the SCHIP proceeding, which is focused on self-generation incentive programs. And then the tech initiative lives in the building decarb proceeding. So we're looking at programs, ways to further decarbonize buildings. And so those two proceedings came together to share resources, share staff in creating this program, which I think is pretty cool.
Very nice. Emily, anything to add there?
Nothing to add. Thanks, Sebastian.
Okay. So because you dodged the question, Emily, I'll pick on you on this question. You mentioned there's a lot of gas conversions for this. And I was curious if you could share with the audience any lessons learned on how you communicated with the utility teams, the operations teams that would have to ensure that the electrification didn't have any negative consequences on the grid. Was there anything that you can share on how you made sure that you were recruiting customers and not potentially causing issues with the grid with well intentions?
It's a good question. I think this just goes back to the central design of this S-strip heat pump water heater integration into tech is really that recognition that since we are adding the new electric loads, we need to really take a everything approach to trying to mitigate that peak demand. And so that's why we have not only the time of use kind of inherent load shifting capabilities, but then more recently, the requirement to enroll in those load shifting programs. And then the demand response event-based requirement is just another way to help customers be better grid citizens at that moment in time that they're increasing their home's electric load. So it was less about kind of getting the utilities operations teams involved in this particular regard and just recognizing, hey, the state wants to prioritize installing electric heat pump water heaters. We know that most of California's water heating base is gas. So how can we mitigate those potential peak impacts through the program design itself?
Thank you, Emily. And I was kidding about dodging the question. On the recruitment side of things, did this pilot have locational targeting, or I guess how were participants recruited? How did you know who you wanted to participate? Is there anything you can share about how these participants were I guess, orchestrated into this program?
So yeah, the pilot that we talked about was really like the early days. So the tech load shifting pilot is the one that launched in 2021 when the tech initiative first launched. And that pilot really only stayed in its initial design for a few months. That initial design, we did focus on the Bay Area. We wanted to start with like a small group of contractors to get feedback, and we knew that contractors in the Bay Area had that baseline of already being comfortable participating in incentive programs, utility programs, and so adding that additional load shifting aspect was just one more step. But once the CPUC announced the S-strip heat pump water heater program requirements in 2022, that was a big shift of, hey, demand flexibility is going to be required for everyone getting incentivized heat pump water heater. So let's quickly expand kind of the thinking of our pilot to be statewide and really just work on preparing contractors for those upcoming requirements. So really at that point, when CPUC announced those requirements, it wasn't a focused, constrained pilot effort. It was recognizing anyone who was going to be getting a tech incentive would have these requirements. And in terms of our kind of who we target for enrollment, our tech contractor base is really across the whole state, and we market the initiative as broadly as possible. It's a market transformation initiative. We want to bring as many contractors along in these early stages as possible. So the program is open to everyone, who has the required licensing and insurance. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. Awesome. So I see a group of questions that are going to be a little bit, they're still focused on, I think, the devices and penetration. So I'm going to try to group them together and go in a logical order here. I'll start out with, what is the penetration of heat pump water heaters in California? And I guess part of that question is going to be, is demand response and load flexibility expected to spur adoption of the heat pump water heaters?
Great question. So I'll actually point to the California Heat Pump Partnership for the first part of that question, which is a private-public partnership working toward California's stated goal of installing 6 million heat pump water heaters by 2030. And so the Heat Pump Partnership is identifying certain market barriers and solutions to get to that lofty goal. And they put out a really great blueprint report. So you can just search California Heat Pump Partnership blueprint, and they estimate that as of the end of 2024, an estimated 1.9 million heat pump units were installed. Now, this is heat pumps, and they estimate that of the water heaters also sold annually, I believe this is to the state, 3 to 5% are heat pump water heaters. So we are in that early stage of heat pump water heater market adoption, and that's why initiatives like this one and the varied efforts going on across the state right now are so important. And then to the question of whether demand response and load shifting will help increase heat pump water heater adoption, I think that's a really good one. I would imagine that as California's rates continue to evolve and we have more options for dynamic rates and pricing, it's going to be really helpful to educate consumers about the flexibility features of these water heaters that can actually help them reduce what they're paying on their electricity bills if those demand flexibility features are used in coordination with time variant rates.
So, Emily, I'm going to key in on what you said about, I guess, the customer experience and how they're feeling there. There was a question about what are the biggest concerns or issues that have to be overcome for more widespread adoption. I'm curious, is that the challenge, the customer, or is there something else that that you think is a more significant concern for the overall adoption of heat pump water heaters?
Yeah, and I mean, this is a big question, and so many people in the industry are trying to tackle this. I would say there's some general consensus among folks working on heat pump water heater market transformation across the nation, but also in California, that there are a variety of challenges that we need to overcome. Some of those are the upfront costs, so just the equipment, and then the installations can be more costly because they're unfamiliar, especially when there's electrical upgrade needs, and permitting can be time intensive and also costly. There's then the ongoing costs. So there's not always a strong value proposition of like bill savings depending on the rates. And then there's customer education and awareness, like you mentioned, but also contractor education so that those installs become more commonplace, and needing to grow the workforce. Specifically in terms of demand management with water heaters, there are some needs to make sure that all products have these capabilities and they work as expected. And then, like I mentioned, customer and contractor education is important to understand these product features are available and how they help them. And I do want to also emphasize tech is a market transformation initiative. It's the CPUC's flagship initiative. But there's also other entities working on this and great resources. I mentioned the California Heat Pump Partnership and their blueprint report. So they really break down what they see and kind of what their members have consensus on as those main barriers and proposed solutions. Also, the Cal Next initiative researches emerging technologies that can help California decarbonize, and one of their priority areas is heat pump water heaters. They have a whole water heater homepage that you can check out. The Advanced Water Heating Initiative, has a 2024 State of the Market report that also has great information on barriers and solutions. And then finally, bringing it back to tech, another aspect of tech, other than these statewide incentives, is pilots and quick start grants really aimed at addressing these market barriers. So you could look at the tech pilots and quick start grants to understand those issues and the progress that we've made. techcleanca.com. That was a long response. I hope that was helpful.
All good. I guess focusing on the customer still, there's a question that came in the chat that are customers expected or required to participate for a period of time, a set period of time? Or is there any, I guess, what is the customer expectation for enrolling in this type of program or pilot?
Yeah, so this is actually based on the CPUC decision that put forth these rules. And the stated requirement is to enroll for 3 years or stay enrolled for 3 years. So we have the terms and conditions that the customers sign and that they are signing off to that requirement.
Okay, I'm going to hit one more customer-focused one before I switch topics on you. To what extent might small commercial businesses be desirable targets for heating electrification and demand response?
Yeah, this is a great question. So ESHA heat pump water heater did have some commercial incentives, and we did see challenges with uptake. So at a high level, technology availability was one, especially based on the requirement to have the DR controls with the units themselves. Also, the electrical infrastructure challenges can be more present than in the residential setting, and there's generally a need for more layered incentives on the commercial side. So on the resi side, we have a pretty rich landscape of heat pump water heater incentive programs, but less so on the commercial side. And so while I mentioned uptake is still low, we're very much still learning about heat pump water heaters and how they'll fit in this commercial sector. And we just encourage more incentives and other measures and initiatives to increase adoption so that we can get more information to this question.
Okay. So I'm going to give you a slight reprieve. I know there's more questions coming in. I'm going to switch topics on you because I think the contractor training and education piece was a big piece of this presentation. And I noted in there that tech webinars and training videos were identified as having the least amount of don't know, haven't used. So a very specific response there. And that would seemingly be indicative that they were well attended or well valued. And I was curious, is that sentiment or that takeaway true? And if so, do you have any keys to success of how did you get it so valuable to the contractors?
Yeah, that's a great thing to notice. And we actually had, so when we kind of transitioned from the tech program to the SCHIP requirements, fueling the new tech version of the program, we required contractors to take an additional training before they could even continue to participate in the incentive program. So that was a relatively short training video, but we had to make sure that they were fully aware of all those new demand flexibility requirements that came out. So that probably contributes to the low, don't know, haven't used response. And really that like required training aspect, I think is so important because of our scale of, as I mentioned earlier, over 350 contractors have submitted heat pump water heater claims or incentive claims. So we can't talk to each of them. We can't like one-on-one make sure they understand the requirements. That's why we have to have some required training videos. And we also do, whenever we launch incentives, we do at least 2 webinars, live webinars that are an hour or 2 to go through all the rules, really break down like, you know, here's how we recommend going about this, here are all the resources, and those are very heavily attended. So it's great to see that even though they're not required, contractors are putting in that effort to show up, make sure they have all the details they need.
Okay, great. I think I'm going to switch back to some potentially more device-based or customer-based challenges. So one of the comments was talking about the cost of a heat pump water heater being roughly $8,000. Is there, I guess, any opportunity that you can share how you had that value proposition of why a customer should go a heat pump water heater route when the alternative of just a regular resistance heater is so significantly cheaper?
Yeah. This is like, it's a big difficulty to tackle. And I would say that we're in the early stages of getting to that scale that you need to bring down the cost of the products, also getting that contractor familiarity so that those installations are happening quicker and less costly just on the labor and installation side. One thing that we do with the tech initiative is we publish the cost data for all of our installations. so customers can get a sense, and policymakers, other folks, of the average costs and the low end and the high end, and you can actually narrow down on that by location. So we always encourage customers, especially if they reach out asking to get quotes from multiple contractors, use that understanding of what the range of prices in the areas can be. But this is why, like in this early stage of the market transformation, while costs are still admittedly high, that's why we really need those upfront incentives, so that we're trying to bring that that all-in cost of the installation and technology to a level that's at least comparable to the incumbent, gas installation or electric resistance. And oftentimes we have a lot of your early adopter type customers participating in the program. So they're excited about the new, most efficient smart technology. They're in a process of electrifying their homes in some cases. But we also have a lot of interest driven by our enrolled contractors who see that the market is evolving. We have standards coming down. They need to be working early now to evolve their business models to be installing the heat pump water heater technology.
So I'm going to pull on this thread a little bit more because I'm curious. I know anecdotally that a lot of pricing challenge can come from contractors not knowing the technology, and they have what they know on the truck. I'm curious if you are looking at or have seen anything that with contractor education and increasingly becoming more comfortable with a heat pump technology, are you seeing that these programs, pilots, are helping drive costs of these installs down, or are they relatively staying stagnant? You're just having contractors be able to talk through why the additional cost is more beneficial. So I think there's a lot of ties to the contractor around this, and I was curious if you had any thoughts on any trends you might be seeing or anything that would be worth noting for the audience.
Yeah, that's a big question, and I don't want to speak out of turn here. There's other folks on the tech initiative that are looking at that a little more closely. I will say that over the course of a few kind of starts and stops and rounds of incentives, we have been able to ratchet the incentives down kind of incrementally. So, going from 3,100 to 1,100 base incentive with the opportunity still for a tank size adder, and we're still seeing the participation stay steady. So this could speak to contractors, becoming more familiar with their business so that they can still continue to do a profitable install with less, programmatic support there. But I don't want to act like I have the full answer to that great question right now, Kevin.
All good. I figured I'd try to get what I could. So I know we're at time. So before I pass it over to Judy, I just want to thank you guys, Sebastian, Emily, for the presentation today. Really appreciate all the knowledge and insights you shared. It's been a pleasure. Judy, I will pass it to you.
Thank you, Kevin. And thank you so much, Emily and Sebastian, for a really interesting discussion. And congratulations again on your PLMA award. We're really delighted to see what you've been able to accomplish. And to everybody in the audience, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate having you with us. And we imagine that you may potentially like to recommend this webinar to friends and colleagues. And if so, please take a look at PLMA's YouTube channel, and you can see a recording there. It will be up in the next couple of days. And also PLMA's podcast platform will also host this particular webinar. In addition, I wanted to let you know that PLMA has 2 classes coming up this fall. Our Load Flex Fundamentals class will be in October, mid-October. And our Wholesale Markets class, which is a more advanced class, will be held at the end of September. You'll see there's a little QR code there, or you can go to PLMA's website at flexload.org to find out more about both of these classes. And want to also let you know that our next big event is PLMA's Fall Conference. It will be held in Henderson, Nevada, which is near the Hoover Dam. It will be November 3rd to 5th. And also we have an agenda that is up on our website, and you can take a look at the sessions that are planned and still more activities being added as we speak. It's going to be a fabulous event, and we look forward to seeing as many of you there as possible. And last of all, wanted to just quickly let you know on PLMA's news page, we are listing jobs that are available in the industry, or posting jobs, press releases, as well as RFPs and RFIs. So please consider that a resource for any of those opportunities. And if you are a PLMA member, of course, we encourage you to post your news with us, as well as everywhere else that you're posting it, to reach all the folks that are involved in this organization. And with that, let me just quickly say thank you to everybody for joining us today. You've been listening to a load management dialogue presented by PLMA. To learn more about upcoming dialogues, please visit the PLMA calendar at flexload.org. And thank you. This concludes this edition. Have a good rest of your day, and thank you for joining us.